with the weather that we've been having, sometimes the snow can just paralyze the city, so I'm so glad that you all are here, even though it's 2 inches of snow or something. And as Father mentioned, I'm very fortunate to work at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops here in D.C., and I'm especially fortunate to be able to work on an issue that's taken on really critical significance in recent times, and that's the issue of religious liberty. And this morning I'd like to offer a brief overview of some of the threats that we've seen to religious liberty, and to offer some ways that we here in this room can help to stem some of these threats to our first freedom. And freedom of religion has really the honor of being the first freedom outlined in the First Amendment to our nation's Constitution. And for a long time, though, despite its importance, a lot of us took freedom of religion for granted. And maybe some of us thought that it's an issue that only comes up like once a year around Christmas when there are disputes about the nativity scene on local town hall lawn. But attacks on our first American freedom have really been growing in recent years amid aggressive secularism in our politics and in our culture. In fact, a recent study by the Pew Forum on Religion and Public Life found that there's a, quote, rising tide of restrictions on religion in the United States. Now, this study took place between 2009 and 2010, even before the Health and Human Services mandate, which I'll get to in a minute, was announced. And the Pew study showed that both government restrictions and social hostilities against religion had increased in the U.S. So what are the kinds of religious freedom violations that we're worried about at the U.S. Conference of Catholic Bishops? Well, last year, the bishops' new ad hoc committee for religious liberty published a statement called Our First Most Cherished Liberty. And you can find the statement on the USCCB website, which is usccb.org/freedom, or on our new religious freedom website, which is www.firstamericanfreedom.com. There are a lot of resources about the HHS mandate and other issues on that website. And so the bishop's statement that came out last year outlines several recent examples of religious liberty under attack in the U.S. And while the Health and Human Services mandate is certainly the most visible example if we were to judge by media coverage of the issue last year, other examples abound, and I'll just mention a couple. One example is our Catholic foster care and adoption services. And for decades, Catholic Charities affiliates around the country have handled some of the most difficult placements of children who are seeking adoption. But because Catholic Charities in the city of Boston, in San Francisco, here in D.C., and in the state of Illinois refused on religious grounds to place children with same-sex couples or unmarried cohabiting opposite-sex couples, state and local governments there have driven Catholic Charities agencies out of the business of providing these services. And as you're likely well aware, the Supreme Court is going to be taking up 2 cases this year involving the redefinition of marriage, with decisions most likely in June of this year. And we feel that if the Supreme Court decides to redefine marriage, then this could have disastrous consequences for religious liberty, and it could in effect be the Roe v. Wade of marriage. So we're very concerned about that issue at the Catholic Bishops' Conference. And I could go on for a long time about the concerns with marriage, but I know that you have a March for Life to get to, so I'm going to get to other religious liberty concerns. In the immigration context, several states have recently passed laws that forbid what the government deems as harboring of undocumented immigrants. And this is what the church deems as, Christian charity and pastoral care to these immigrants. And in serving victims of human trafficking, which are some of the most vulnerable of all immigrants, the Catholic Bishops' Migration and Refugee Services has done an outstanding job. But unfortunately, after years of excellent performance under a government contract to serve these most vulnerable trafficking victims, the federal government in 2011 changed its contract specifications to require MRS to provide or refer for contraceptive or abortion procedures in violation of Catholic teaching. We don't think that religious institutions should be disqualified from a government contract based on religious belief, and we don't somehow lose our religious identity or liberty or morals upon entering these kinds of contracts. Last year, a trial court in Boston, in a case called ACLU of Massachusetts versus HHS, held that the First Amendment required the federal government to disqualify MRS from its contract to avoid so-called establishment of religion. We think that this case basically turns religious liberty on its head. But fortunately, just last week, thanks be to God, an appellate court, also in Boston, got rid of this terrible decision on procedural grounds. But we can anticipate more similar challenges in the future because of the Catholic Church's position on abortion and contraception. And finally, the example that everyone's probably most familiar with of a religious liberty violation is the HHS mandate requiring employers to facilitate and to fund contraception, sterilization, and abortion-inducing drugs in their health plans. Now, the U.S. Catholic bishops have been united in their opposition to this unjust mandate. And Catholics have been joined by many, many others who see the religious freedom threat that this poses to both religious institutions and to private individuals. And to give an update on the current situation with the mandate, there are now over 40 lawsuits on behalf of over 110 plaintiffs representing hospitals, universities, businesses, schools, and people who are all speaking with one voice to affirm the freedom of religion that's guaranteed in our Constitution. Now, all these court cases are in different stages of the litigation. So the mandate went into effect for for-profit businesses on August 1st of last year. And because of that, the cases on behalf of the for-profit entities have gotten past procedural hurdles, and they've been heard, at least at an early stage, on some of the substance of their claims. And so far, the results of the for-profit cases have been pretty encouraging. To date, of the 14 for-profit plaintiffs who have obtained rulings from the courts touching the merits of their claims against the mandate, 9 have secured some type of early relief against it, so they don't have to comply at this point with the HHS mandate. But unfortunately, Hobby Lobby, which is a retail arts and crafts chain of stores around the country in over 40 states, so they're probably the most well-known plaintiff challenging the HHS mandate. They have been unable to obtain relief so far. So their case is likely going to go to trial, and we hope and pray that they can obtain some kind of relief at that stage. And for the nonprofit plaintiffs, like religious charities, hospitals, universities, and Catholic dioceses, the government provided what it called a safe harbor, or as Cardinal Dolan of New York said, a year to figure out how to violate our consciences. So the mandate for them does not go into effect for certain nonprofits with religious objections until August 1st of this year. So it's very complicated how it was all set up and the timing of when the mandate kicks in, depending who you are. But the government has now promised that it's going to rewrite the rule for nonprofit institutions, and it's going to publish this new notice of proposed rulemaking, it's called in legalese, by March 31st. So for this reason, most of the courts that are hearing cases brought by nonprofit entities like Notre Dame and many other colleges and other entities, the courts are saying, in effect, that these cases are being brought too early because the government has promised some change to the proposed rule. But litigation, in any event, is unpredictable, and it can take a long time to get the desired result, or even any result that's final. So we're still at the Bishops' Conference pushing for some kind of legislative action in Congress to protect the rights of conscience of those who oppose the HHS mandate. And last year, there were efforts to pass a freestanding bill, which was called the Respect for Rights of Conscience Act. But those efforts stalled in both the House and the Senate. But we do, at this point, hold out some hope for conscience rights on this issue to be included in some kind of must-pass piece of legislation this year. So some kind of legislation maybe affecting the budget or something that Congress has to pass. We're hoping to get conscience rights smuggled in there somehow. So what can you and I do about all of this? Well, we can write postcards to Congress, and we can write a lot of them. The last postcard campaign that the USCCB did in 2009 regarding the Freedom of Choice Act generated tens of millions of postcards to Congress, tens of millions. And we're hoping for the same great numbers as we focus on pro-life and religious freedom concerns this time around. And we've got the message already prepared on each postcard. It's not Catholic specific. It can be used by anyone who supports life and religious liberty to alert their senators and their representatives that these issues should be high priorities in this legislative term. To order postcards, you can visit nchla.org, which stands for the National Committee for a Human Life Amendment. And you can also send emails to Capitol Hill in response to alerts by visiting the NCHLA Action Center, which can also be found at nchla.org. And I'll give Ann this information so she can get it out to you guys as well, so that you can send in physical postcards and e-postcards as well. We just want to swarm Congress with these messages that these issues are really important. You can also call your representatives in Congress, call a radio talk show, write a letter to the editor of your local newspaper, speak at public events, or meet with your representative and senators. And you can also ask others to join you in these efforts. And as we all know, there's strength in numbers, and I'm pleased to see so many of you here today. So to find out more information about religious liberty updates, you can visit the USCCB's website at usccb.org/freedom, or again, our new website, www.firstamericanfreedom.com. From there, you can sign up for text message alerts, and you can also sign up for text message alerts by texting the word freedom to the number 377-377. So we send out alerts on different action items that you can take, like call Congress today or something like that. And finally, you can get involved in preparing and planning for the next Fortnight for Freedom, which will take place in June and July of this year. And the Fortnight had great participation last year in our first Fortnight for Freedom. And it really comes at an important time this year because, as I mentioned, we expect the Supreme Court to issue its rulings on the marriage cases in June. And as I mentioned also, the HHS mandate goes into effect for religious nonprofit organizations just a few weeks later on August 1st of this year. So hopefully I've given you quite a few action items to think about. And just to wrap up, just to reiterate, we've reached really a critical moment in our nation's history. People of faith are now being forced to violate their faith by being made to pay for and arrange for drugs and procedures that violate their moral teaching. We hope and pray for a change in our laws and for a change in our culture that provides a more fertile ground for religious liberty and respect for the rights of conscience. We see the rights to life and to liberty as intertwined because, as Thomas Jefferson said, the God who gave us life gave us liberty at the same time. So many of our threats to religious liberty that we face stem from our stance on the sanctity of life from conception to natural death. So thank you, everyone, for coming all the way to DC, for your kind attention, and for your willingness to fight for life and liberty.